2 quarts of fake blood, countless props, and over 200 volunteer hours later, here we are. Our Make a Difference Day project was the Betsy Mills Haunted House, and we raised $940 to help renovate the men's locker room. I'm Emma. This is Melissa, Hannah, Bria, and Katie.
We saw many different types of leadership throughout our Make a Difference Day project, and 4 stood out in our mind. Creating a ethical, moral environment by Julian. Power, influence tactics by Hughes, Ginnett, and Kirby. By dispersed leadership by Gardner. Transformational and transactional leadership. We also learned a lot about being leaders, doing service, and working in a group. We'll tell you more about this throughout our presentation.
So for pre-MADD, before we set up the haunted house, we had weekly meetings from the very beginning. It was really slow, but it started to pick up once we got closer to Make a Difference Day. We organized and made a list to begin with, and then Bria and I did a floor plan once we had an inventory list. Bria and Melissa did advertising. Melissa did the flyers, and Bria contacted the radio and newspaper stations. And Emma and Hannah got the volunteers we needed. We all set up the basement ahead of time in order to be ahead of the game when Make a Difference Day came.
Okay, so finally the day of Make a Difference Day arrived, and that morning things got a little crazy, but thankfully we had the cross-country team to help us set up. So we had to set up the maze that morning. We couldn't do it beforehand because they have classes in the gym at Betsy Mills. We got there and we kind of had a box dilemma because Linda, who was our community partner, had wanted boxes for the maze, but we were unaware of that until that morning. So Hannah and I took off all over the Mid-Ohio Valley in search of boxes. Also that day we finished the setup with lights and music, making sure we had those in every room. As the night went on, we had to add more lights. And then also with our second phase volunteers, not all of them showed up, so we kind of had to improvise, and we actually ended up acting in the second part of our haunted house. And then during our teardown, we learned that it takes approximately 2 months to plan a haunted house and only 20 minutes to tear down.
Okay, so post-MADD, pretty much we had to finish the teardown, so we had to take out the tarps. One of the main issues with that was that the gym was taken over by children trick-or-treating that night. So we had to take the tarps down to a really tiny room in the basement and then try to pull them back up, which proved to be quite difficult. And then we organized all the remaining supplies and then put them back in the back room. And after that, we had a group reflection throughout the several weeks since it's been since MADD, and we've been discussing it ever since, and we've had quite a few epiphanies.
So to begin with, Joanne B. Ciala wrote Creating an Ethical Environment, and we related this to our Make a Difference Day crew because we made sure to do a walkthrough before the volunteers started acting to let them know not to touch the people walking through. We also warned parents to not allow their children to go through because it was very scary and meant for high schoolers and above. But one kid decided to go through it 5 times, and we had to make sure that he didn't because he was starting to harm our volunteers. And we had some immature and irresponsible volunteers who were using crowbars, and so we had to make sure that we took that out of their use.
In power, influence, and influence tactics, we saw different types of power: legitimate, referent, coercive, reward, and expert. Legitimate power was used by Linda Lewis because she was the executive director of Betsy Mills and had the final say in what we did. Referent power was used in our group because we had a good relationship with Shauna, and this made us want to work harder to create a better haunted house for her and for our group members. Coercive power was used by the McDonald Leadership Program because McDonald gave us the final grade for our project. Reward power was also used because we gave the volunteers the freedom to do whatever they wanted in the haunted house, except if they could touch the people that were going through it. And expert power was used by Linda and Melissa Linda had expert power over us because she had done this many times before, and Melissa actually gained expert power by learning how to apply makeup on our volunteers.
We also used influence tactics in our project. Rational persuasion was used when our group wanted to use dry ice, but we discovered that it would be impractical, so we rationally persuaded one another against using a potentially dangerous and costly prop. We used inspirational appeals when we tried to persuade people to do our haunted house. We told them it would be fun and exciting. We used consultation when we let the volunteers plan their own actions. One good example would be the doctor and the patient who were in the asylum and they wanted to do Shutter Island. So we let them do a Shutter Island theme and they made their own sign for the door. We also used personal appeals when we got our friends to volunteer for us and when we got our friends and family to come through the haunted house and see it for themselves. We used coalition when we consulted each other and walked through the haunted house to make sure things were set and making last-minute changes. We used pressure tactics when Bria was very persistent when she tried to get a hold of the media, and she left them several messages and did not give up trying to contact them for any length of time. We also used legitimizing tactics with the volunteers. They knew we were in charge, so we influenced them in that way. And we were also influenced by Linda because she had legitimizing power over us, so she used legitimizing tactics in that regard as well.
Okay. Another type of leadership we saw was the cry for leadership. Dispersed leadership, we used this a lot throughout our project. Everyone took on different tasks, and we saw it especially the day of with the setup. Hannah and I ended up having to leave several times to go get supplies while the rest of the group stayed in to set up. Sleepwalking, we really tried to avoid this throughout our project by planning a lot. However, we kind of ended up sleepwalking with the maze just because we weren't allowed to set up for it any before. And we were looking for Linda to be our savior because no one really knew how to set up the maze. And we knew that she'd done it before, but that turned out not to be the case. So that kind of caused some difficulties.
So there was also transactional and transformational leadership evident. Transactional leadership was, the main thing was the fact that the volunteer hours people actually needed them. It was like a transaction. You do this and you get hours. And there was also transformational leadership in the end when we realized we saw everyone getting involved, and then we showed enthusiasm, which trickled down to the rest of the people, and then they ended up creating their own little scenarios, and it spread down throughout.
Some leadership insights we gained are that leadership is very stressful, takes a lot of trust to work with a group. You have to look for guidance, and you'll look to for guidance, which is different for us because we've never necessarily been looked to for help or to be the people in charge. We had to learn how to cooperate and how necessary it is to work together. We learned that it's okay to mess up. Things happen. Things are always going to happen, and it's just about getting back on the horse and carrying on. We also learned that a good leader knows when to step down. And we knew when someone should take charge, when someone should step back, and I think we all learned a great deal about when we should step forward or when we should let someone else lead.
So there were several service insights, and one of the main ones was the fact that detailed plans definitely help organize. And the other one, as you can see in this picture here, is happy volunteers are good volunteers. And when all else fails, improvise. That's the main one, because there were several issues and we ended up improvising.
We had a great experience in our group. We respected each other's opinions. When Melissa had an idea about dry ice, we realized that it might not be a great idea because of how expensive it was. We used groupthink because we wanted to promote unity, and our MBTIs are very close, so we didn't come up with a lot of new creative ideas, which was one of the downfalls. We compromised a lot and worked with what we received.
We had some problems trying to make a difference in the project. One was that we had a hard time contacting Linda. She wasn't always there all the time, and that kind of messed us up with the maze. This was Shauna's first time doing the haunted house, so We had a hard time communicating with her and what we needed to do. Bria had a hard time getting hold of the media. They didn't put Betsy Mills on the radio, so that was difficult. There's an inaccurate sign in the front of Betsy Mills that said that the haunted house was from 7 to 10, but really it was from 7 to 11. Some of the volunteers that we had were friends or older than us, so we didn't feel comfortable bossing them around, so we had to step up from that situation. And we have 5 people in our group, and we all have very different schedules, so it's very hard to meet at sometimes, so we had to make sure that we had to keep everyone updated on what we did.
Okay, and finally, along with some of our difficulties, we had a lot of great successes, and I think our project really paid off. It was a great chance for community involvement. We got to see a lot of people in the community come out and enjoy an activity. Our haunted house actually ended up being scary, which was really nice. We were really proud of that. We all worked very well together and respected each other's ideas. The haunted house looked great, and so our community partners, they were really proud of that. Melissa found us some really great makeup artists. I know she brought one of her friends from OU, and then she taught herself how to apply Halloween makeup, which was really nice. Our volunteers also had fun, and we even received some extra donations from people who went through the haunted house.
Finally, we love our volunteers.
They were really great. I don't think we should all say that in a sentence. I feel like that's really cheesy.